Over at BangTheBook.com, we are your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. We cover football, basketball, both NBA and college, as well as WNBA. Major League Baseball wrapping up here this week. I'll have some series previews for you for the Major League Baseball playoffs that begin next week and could begin as early as Monday with some wildcard tiebreaker games. We're also going to have a lot of NHL coverage this season from Parker Michaels. We'll have a lot of stuff going on for soccer, tennis, golf, UFC, NASCAR, both Cup Series and Xfinity Series. The Breeders' Cup Classic, not that far away. We'll have a preview up for that as well. So lots of great stuff going on over at BangTheBook.com, your one-stop shop for sports betting news and information. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio, presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB and the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook, 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. Two guests on the program here today. We start things off with Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Brian, how's it going today, man?
Hi, Adam. How are you, buddy?
Doing well, man. Appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much for joining me. And let's go ahead and dive right in here, taking a look at the NFL, going from week 3 to week 4. Week 3, kind of a mess. Again, a couple of big favorites, as we talked about all throughout last week. Lots of backup quarterbacks. Some did well, some didn't. A couple of misleading final scores out there, too. Do you feel any more confident in the NFL now that we're 3 weeks in, or is it still just hard to gauge a lot of these teams?
Yeah, I would say it's starting to sort things out. I think there are things that make sense in things that we can apply with maybe a firmer level of confidence. I still think there's some gray areas. I thought New Orleans showed a lot going up there and winning. I will say this, but it's like, we talk about all the dad's trip in hockey and things you got to take note of. When a team is on the road together for a week, you got to play them. I mean, that the bonding thing, even for a pro team. I mean, the Niners stayed in Ohio and thumped the Bengals, and New Orleans, even after losing Breeze, stays in California and goes up and plays that kind of game against the Saints. Even though they're pros, the intangible things are the things that really matter.
Yeah, that is an excellent point. A lot of times you do have these teams that do bond, and especially if there's some level of adversity. The 49ers won their game in Tampa but didn't play particularly well, ironed a lot of things out, and completely decimated the Bengals in week 2. Saints, same thing here, kind of rallying together around Teddy Bridgewater with that Drew Brees injury, and they do pick up that big road win. And, we will see, of course, how they follow it up now, if they're able to, keep that whatever you want to call it, camaraderie, I guess, might be the word to use here. The Raiders probably in that spot here this week as well. I haven't seen anything definitive, but I can't imagine they went all the way home with a trip to London coming up next week.
It's amazing, bud. And one other one, I will say, I'm a dope, but the thing that I stayed away from the game, but I'll just throw this out there that I bet you we've been doing the podcast long enough that it probably bled into what stuff we had done now years ago. But there was a long stretch. It was about a 2 or 3 year window when teams played Pittsburgh, and the following week, the team that played Pittsburgh the next week just had an atrocious record against the spread and straight up because Pittsburgh was so physical, and that lasted for about 2.5, 3 years. Then all of a sudden, Seattle in their heyday was playing that way, physically beating up teams. And then the following week, the teams that played Seattle struggled straight up and against the spread. I mean, it was like a gold mine. You found that little nugget. And it was right there on full display. And for me, shame on me, I didn't trust the Lions. But if you watch that Philly-Atlanta game, Philly was a mangled mesh unit walking out of Atlanta. And I know it was a kick return and turnovers, but Detroit won that game. I would just say this for people: if you're watching a game and you're seeing a real physical game, and it's exacting a real big toll on the team, fade that team the next week. That is a real thing.
Yeah, it really is. And I don't know. Do you think that there's a team that may kind of morph into that sort of role here this season, where they're just so physical that the following week you have a lot of trouble playing? that follow-up game. I mean, the Bears, maybe, I don't know. They're not as physical on offense as they are on defense. I don't know if there's a team that fits that mold this year. Buffalo, maybe?
Yeah, Buffalo's got a really good defense, but I don't know that they're, exacting a physical toll on teams. I mean, they're just fast.
Minnesota?
Possibly, yeah. I'm just saying that I think it is something to maybe watch for and maybe even apply on a week-to-week basis, that if, for whatever reason, like if you're sitting at a house party with your friends and you're watching a game and you turn to your buddy and go, damn, man, this is a physical game. Think about that. If it's a brutal physical game, and maybe both teams are really, if it's a Baltimore-Pittsburgh game, or, a fierce rivalry, and you're watching a game, and you say to yourself or your friends, boy, this is a physical game, isn't it? As a starting point, look to fade those teams coming out of a game like that the next week.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, early in the season, you'd like to think these teams are still relatively fresh. I mean, a lot of teams beaten up, a lot of lingering injuries, and already a lot of big-name injuries as well. But I totally agree with you, especially because the NFL, I know all the hits are violent, but it's not nearly the level of physicality in the trenches that it used to be. It's a lot more of a finesse type of game now. We see that with all the air raid quarterbacks that played last week, a lot of RPO concepts in the NFL now. If you do get that physical opponent at some point during the year, I think there can be a physical hangover that following week. I think it's a very good angle to consider.
Well, here, I'll throw a college one at you. And I watched the whole game. It was Buffalo was playing Penn State. And Buffalo dominated Penn State in the first half. I believe they were up 10-7 at the half. And, I mean, they pushed them around, their offensive line. Freshman quarterback on the road, and they were running the ball down their throat. And then they came out in the second half, and the freshman quarterback threw a pick six, and then they blocked the punt. It was a grisly injury. The punter got hurt. And Penn State scored like 3 touchdowns in the blink of an eye. But then because they have so many more players to roll out, they exacted, Penn State did, a real physical toll on Buffalo, who expended so much energy in that game. The next week they went to play Liberty, who's not bad. Liberty's pretty good. And Liberty, ate them up. And I got friends, poking me because, I like Buffalo. And oh, boy, they're phony. They went to Liberty. And I'm like, they got killed in that Penn State game. Well, sure enough, the next week they come back a week and a half, 2 weeks removed from the Penn State game. They're catching 14 points at home to Temple. They beat the hell out of Temple. I mean, they got beat up by Penn State, and it ate them alive. I mean, so 1 week to the next. I mean, these are things that you got to. The thing is to spot those angles and those things in advance. Not talking about it today after the fact, but I bring it up that it's something to just pay when you're watching a game. If you see something like that where teams are just they're getting killed today, they're in trouble the next week.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Again, we talk about all the different ways of handicapping here, whether you do it from a quant standpoint, whether you put together power ratings, whether you use situational handicapping or trends. As Brian always says, I mean, he likes to rely on his eyes that are in his head, and you can see some of these things for the following week, and I think it's an excellent point. And again, all part of the handicapping process if you're able to watch a lot of these games and then take these things and follow them through the following week. So let's see if we get any games like that here in week 4. And let's talk about those Eagles, because this is a brutal situation for them. A quick turnaround. They play the Green Bay Packers on Thursday night on the road. Packers up from 3.5 to 4.5. Some of the more public shops in the offshore market showing 5 already. I mean, look, maybe this line is a little bit inflated. Maybe this line's kind of getting out of control. But I could not touch Philadelphia here with that turnaround. And as you mentioned, all the injuries that they have.
Yeah, I mean, this number's really inflated. At best guess, if it's a road Thursday game, but I think this is still a residual effect of the Atlanta game, them losing to the Lions, and obviously they're very shorthanded at wide receiver. If this game was played opening week, what do you think, Adam? Green Bay's probably 2?
Yeah, I would think so. 2.5 maybe, yeah.
So on top of it, the one thing, listen, Philly's a really good team. If you got two guys, I mean, Rodgers knows what it means to be an MVP. Wentz was on his way to being an MVP before he got hurt a couple of years ago. It's a really compelling Thursday night matchup. This is just a function of the short week and having to travel. That being said, probably the worst thing that happened to Green Bay is Philly's coming off a loss, and what's that motivation aspect coming off a defeat? That might be the great equalizer. That's a tough one, man. That number is high.
Well, and in fact, I just looked it up. When CG Technology released lines for weeks 2 through 16 in the NFL back in the month of May, this line was Green Bay -2. Total was also 47.5 at that point in time, down to 45 here. Opened 47.5 though. So even though Green Bay's, I think that's where the value was on this game, was on the under, because Green Bay's defense looks much better than any of us expected, and Philadelphia is still banged up at the skill positions. I'm surprised there wasn't an initial adjustment to the opening total from what we saw over the summer, but going from 2 to 4.5 or 5, again, does price in the injuries, and also Green Bay's looked pretty good on defense, like I mentioned. So that's the tough thing here. This line's kind of getting away from people. A lot of public players will probably take Green Bay because of Aaron Rodgers and the well-documented Philadelphia injuries. You got to keep in mind here that, over the long term, if you're laying an adjusted number that's 2.5 points higher, you're probably not going to do very well. This spot, though, may just be tough enough for the Eagles for Green Bay to come through to the window.
And by the way, I throw one other thing at you. Another thing that I don't think enough people take into account, and it is such a big deal, are the coordinators. And, Jim Schwartz, you laugh at Atlanta all you want, but Atlanta is brutal on the road, but Atlanta is good at home. And even though the Eagles lost that game to the Falcons 24-20, during the course of that game, guys were dropping like flies. Jim Schwartz's game plan kept them in that game. They lost 24-20. So if the Eagles do anything, and if they were to walk out of here with a win, the guy that's going to be the key to this is Jim Schwartz and what he does against Aaron Rodgers. And don't forget all the years he had playing in that division as a member of the Lions, and he knows Rodgers and his tendencies. I'm on board with you. Probably the safer way to go might be the under in this game.
Well, and also, too, keep in mind, you've got the quick turnaround for Green Bay here as well with a first-year head coach in Matt LaFleur. And, we know Green Bay is trying to work in a lot of concepts from that offense, which hasn't been overly efficient yet to this point. Maybe this is the week that it changes, but there is also that, too. So a little bit of a complex handicap. I think people are going to look on the surface of that game and just say, well, it's got to be Green Bay because of all the Philadelphia injuries. But there's definitely more layers to that onion as you kind of keep peeling that game back a little bit. I know there are a lot of layers to this game as well. A game you're interested in, a game you already have a video preview up for over on our Bang the Book YouTube channel. New England and Buffalo, game 263, 264. Patriots, a touchdown favorite here. Some 7.5s out there in the marketplace as well. My initial thought is that Buffalo is getting a little bit disrespected in this line. My second thought is, does Buffalo deserve that head-to-head respect yet?
It's got to be earned. And I'll tell you this, I did a seminar at Sunset Station before the year, and I was terrified of that game last week with the Bengals. We talked last week, Adam. I said Buffalo's not good enough to be looking past anybody. They were up 14-0. They're going in for another score. Yeldon fumbles at the 8th, and then Josh Allen makes the worst throw in the history of football. Running backwards with a guy in his face and throws it up for grabs. Bengals get an interception, return it to the 20. The whole game changed on a dime. In a blink of an eye, the Bengals scored, got it back, scored again, got it back, got a field goal, and all of a sudden Buffalo, who should have had the game over halfway through the third quarter. But then Josh Allen, he's got a Jim Kelly kind of gunslinger to him, where he is able to put the bad things behind him. And he was so good in the final drive when they needed it, and he drove them right down the field, won the game, and then the defense saved the day with White getting his second interception. So that's a monster win. It saved Buffalo's season. As crazy as that sounds, they can afford to lose this game now. I mean, already looking ahead to the AFC, to me, and there's a lot of football left to be played. But to me, 3 teams are fighting for 2 wild card spots. That's Buffalo, Indy, and the Chargers. And that's a long way down the road. But this game, in the seminar, I said, I'm going to stick my neck out and say, I was hoping, I thought they'd be 2-1. I really did think they'd split the New York games. But I said Buffalo can beat these guys at home. They beat the hell out of New England on a Monday night at home last year. Josh Allen didn't play in the game. Derek Anderson did. The Bills couldn't get a first down, and the Patriots couldn't either. And it was a close game at the last second. Anderson threw a pick 6, and the Patriots walked out of there. I don't know if they won by a dozen, or they might have even covered the spread. This defense is the real deal. And I think and Brady's got Edelman nicked up. He's going to play. Gordon's nicked up. If the Singletary kid comes back, that's a big difference maker for the Bills. But it's the Patriots, and the biggest, as crazy as it sounds, the biggest difference with New England, Brady's thrown more touchdown passes in that stadium than Bills quarterbacks combined for the last 15 years. It's insane. But he would always come back with Rob Gronkowski, who grew up 2 miles from the stadium, and you could have bet your mortgage on it if they offered a prop. Yes, no, will Rob Gronkowski score a touchdown? Gronkowski's not there. They have it's not their fault who they played. They beat Pittsburgh, okay, with Roethlisberger, but emotional night. But then, come on, the Jets and the Dolphins, the Patriots are a machine. But, I mean, they haven't played anybody, and you can make the same case the Bills haven't either. But I think this defense for Buffalo is the great equalizer. And Allen is – I'll even say this, pal. You tell me. It's your backyard. Talk to me 10 years down the road. I've said this, and people laugh at me. Very early on, a lot of cool things. I said, Baker Mayfield this, Baker Mayfield that. Talk to me in 10 years. I'll take Josh Allen.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I haven't seen enough Josh Allen to really decide, but, I mean, Baker – Baker makes so many throws. It's just the decision-making process has not been great. And to be fair, his offensive line hasn't been very good either. But, I think Allen's mobility and his willingness to run. Baker had that willingness to run last year. We haven't seen it from him yet at all this season. I think that he's playing the long game. He doesn't want to go out there and take too many shots. And I guess I can't really fault him for that. I mean, to the detriment of the team where maybe there's been some chances he's had to extend drives. But, Allen he's up there in the toughness charts. As long as that accuracy can be fixed on some of those, deeper and intermediate throws, wouldn't shock me. So I don't think you're sticking your neck out too far there with that. Go ahead.
Lose the inaccuracy thing. I'll tell you, because he makes a throw, and it's like the kid's branded with this inaccuracy thing. Last year, he ran around, and everything he ran around and did it by himself. And the big difference when the Bills play now, the acquisition of John Brown and Cole Beasley, they got an offensive line where there's actually a pocket now. But they got guys that get open. They had no wide receivers last year. And the biggest difference with the Bills is Cole Beasley. And there ain't no flash in the pan with this, but Allen goes back to pass. He scans the field. He looks for the deep shot. And if it's not there instantly, he checks down, and Beasley has 3-yard separation on a linebacker, and he dumps it off to Beasley. And the Bills move the chains now. That's why this defense is really good, but it's even better because the defense isn't on the field all the time. That's why the Bengals went on a run inside that game, because they got the pick, a touchdown. The Bills went 3 and out, and then the Bengals got a touchdown. The Bills had the punt, and the Bills' defense was on the field for a long stretch in 85-degree heat. The difference is Allen and Beasley, they move the chains and keep the defense off the field, and these guys come in fresh, and it is hard to move the ball on that defense. Listen, Patriots can walk in here and win this game by 30, but I'm telling you, the Bills are a team to consider for the long haul this year.
All right, one more game I want to touch on with you here, and I do this the week after a Bills opponent just because I know you've seen that team, and again, you make a lot of very astute observations while you're watching these games. We fast forward all the way to Monday Night Football here. Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh 4.5 point favorite for the predominant number out there at home for what projects to be another awful Monday Night Football game. What do you think about Cincinnati's chances here getting the 4?
Yikes. Well, I'll say this. Yeah, I know. You know what? Mixon's back. And he was quiet for a long time. But when the Bengals got it going and got that run going, Mixon can make plays. By the way, I would say this to you. There's the team, and here, I guess we can do this while we're talking. I would look to fade both of these teams. These two teams hate each other. I mean, you go back to the Burfict days, these games are brutal. Cincinnati-Pittsburgh, these are physical, brutal football games. And they're playing on a Monday night, and then they're going to come back and play on a short week unless they're on a bye. I'm looking real quick.
Pittsburgh plays Baltimore, so that's a really bad spot for them.
Okay, yeah. Pittsburgh gets Baltimore, and Cincy is home to Arizona. I think Arizona's might get taken to the woodshed by a Seattle team coming off a loss this week. But I'd be looking to fade both of these teams. Watch the game Monday night. Everything we started talking about, not even knowing we were going there. Watch that game Monday night. I bet you these guys kill each other. They hate each other. And the short week really comes into play there, Adam, because it's one less day to be in the ice tub.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're used to Monday being your recovery day, and then you have to play a game, and then Tuesday's your recovery day. So you get to practice. You get, 2 good practices in Wednesday, Thursday, assuming you're healthy enough for that. Friday's a walkthrough. At least both of these teams are home, I believe, next week, so there is that. But still, again, it's such a challenge.
I'll count on your youth and clarity to make the memo.
I don't have either one of those anymore.
Well, I'm sure you got more than me, all right? But I was going to say, let's make them together, try to make the mental note. Let's make sure we talk about Cincy-Pittsburgh next Tuesday morning after the Monday night game, because in that particular instance, that may be a game, when you bet sometimes is as important as who you bet, and that may be Tuesday morning, to bet that game early before the number goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely something to keep in mind. And maybe even grab a Baltimore look-ahead number. Might not be a bad call either as they go on the road to Pittsburgh there in Week 5. But speaking of looking ahead here, Brian, I'm sure you're looking ahead to the NHL season. In fact, I know you are. You've been paying attention to everything that's been going on here. Still some RFAs. Maybe Justin Falk gets traded today. There's been a lot of buzz on Twitter about that. The season starts here, October 4th. So this thing's coming up in a hurry, about a week and a half away. As we look at the early odds for the Stanley Cup, Tampa Bay, your favorite, not a big surprise, but of course they got bounced in the first round by Columbus last year in a sweep, no less. They're plus 650. Golden Knights plus 825. Looks like it'll be another fun year out there for you. Toronto, Boston, Dallas, well up there at, about 15-1 this year. Florida, Pittsburgh's up there again. Any early futures looks for you that you're kind of looking at, or any teams you just want to bring to our attention?
My friend, I won't waste a lot of time on this. I wouldn't bet a Stanley Cup future if my life depended on it today. Tampa Bay had a historic season last year, and they were golfing after 4 games in the playoffs. You can't bet a future in hockey. You're nuts to bet a future in hockey. You can't even consider it until the trade deadline. When you want to bet a future, you want to know how a team's constructed to go in the playoffs. They're 2 completely different seasons. And, look at the Blues last year, the run they went on. So I wouldn't even look cross-eyed at a hockey future until after the trade deadline. Then I'd consider it. And because the 6th, 7th, and 8th seeds that get into the playoffs have been playing playoff hockey for 3-4 weeks, and they are so dangerous to the teams that have been on cruise control and had a great regular season. We don't know who those teams are. You're throwing spaghetti at the wall if you even consider it. I would look at regular season points. I think the number that I think is just really a bad number is San Jose. In fact, I was talking to a friend here last night. San Jose. I said the best number to bet out there is over 94.5 for San Jose. They're not going to. They're not going to make the playoffs. You're talking with your heart. You're talking with your heart. The cutoff to make the playoffs is an 8 seed, and in the West, it's higher than the East. But generally speaking, if you get 95 points, you make the playoffs. Is San Jose not making the playoffs? Please. in the West, I think Arizona's going to be better. But in the Pacific, you got to sit there and look at Vegas, San Jose, and Calgary. I 94.5 points. San Jose, they lose Pavelski, but you've got Burns and Carlson back there on the power play alone. San Jose's getting 95 points. That's a bad number to me.
Well, and as I look around at these point totals, and admittedly I haven't done too much with the hockey season as of yet, you've got Anaheim looks like they're going to be down quite a bit this year. Columbus going to be down a lot from last year with a lot of the losses that they had. Detroit, the Kings, Ottawa, those are your bottom feeders based on the point total lines that are out there. But overall, it looks like there's not going to be very many really bad teams. Should be a very competitive season across all four divisions.
No, I think a lot of teams get better. The other thing you got to consider, too, every year there are 3 or 4 new playoff contenders, right? Teams that missed last year are going to be in. So I think Arizona's going to be better. I think Winnipeg is we'll see what happens. Winnipeg's just been decimated on the blue line. They lose 3 of their top 4 defensemen, and I was joking that Buffalo was going to have to play 40 minutes a night, and then Buffalo says, I don't want to play at all anymore. Winnipeg doesn't have any. They got a handful of NHL defensemen. They got Morrissey. If their top pair defenseman is Kulikov, they're dead in the water. I believe, all this talk about Falk. It certainly it could be Falk goes there, but I've been talking for 4 months that Buffalo's moving Rasmus Ristolainen, and he would have been a perfect fit in Winnipeg. You got the 2 restricted free agents, Connor and Liney. Liney takes shots at his teammates, his own teammates, and he's saying that he should be playing with better players. So now he's going to come in and he's going to be buddy-buddy with his centerman Little after taking a pot shot at him. He's apologized, but that's got scars. I think there's a blockbuster coming, and it wouldn't shock me if there's and they had a blockbuster deal in the past with the Jets. If Falk doesn't go to Winnipeg, I'm telling you, I can see Rasmus Ristolainen going to Winnipeg and Liney going to Buffalo, and there'll be a lot of other pieces that'll be thrown in the hopper there.
Well, we'll try to work in some more of this NHL, prop betting talk on next week's segment, but I do want to spend a couple of minutes here looking at this week's event at Silverado, the Safeway Open, because with this wraparound schedule, with how it started a little bit earlier, you've got a new event on the Asian swing, you've got a pretty good field next week at Summerlin. Justin Thomas is playing this week at Silverado. Patrick Cantlay, Adam Scott, Hideki Matsuyama, Bryson DeChambeau, Francesco Molinari coming over stateside to play. Pretty good field here this week at Silverado. So what are you looking at? How do you see this tournament playing out?
Well, there's some stars, like you mentioned, Thomas, Cantlay, Scott, Matsuyama coming off the shelf. I burned so much money on Sung Jae Im this past year, and I feel like I won the tournament this past week because I didn't bet Sung Jae Im, and he lost in the playoff. I felt like I won the tournament. But I will tell you, I got a couple of price plays. I did bet this guy last week, and he finished 6th. And if it weren't for 2 holes over 4 days, Dylan Fratelli took 2 double bogeys. If he didn't have those 2 bad holes, if he had just taken a bogey, it would have 55-1. Dylan Fratelli can play, and he was right there last week. And that 55-1 is a great price on him. I don't think anybody knows this guy. When he wins, you go, who's the guy that just won the golf tournament wearing racquetball glasses? And he can play. So Fratelli at 55-1, and a guy that seriously, when talk about disrespect, I mean, it was one of the biggest heartbreaks of my year last year. Was I probably bet CT Pans 4 or 5 times before the week he won at 100-1, and I didn't have him the week he won. CT Pan, in no way, shape, or form should this guy ever be 100-1. What did he need to do? He had that hot stretch during the course of the summer. This guy should be in the 40-1 range, and he's 100-1. And I'll throw one other at you. I'll give you 3 price plays. They're all 50-1 or higher. Guy played really good in the FedEx Cup playoffs. I mean, really good. And I think he'll take a lot from that experience and move forward. I think Abraham Answer at 50-1 is another guy to contend.
Well, there you go. There's 3 price plays for you from Brian Blessing, the host of Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline. Brian, how can people check out those 2 shows of yours?
Well, bud, we're on kshp.com, noon to 2 Pacific with Sportsbook Radio. We've got the Sportsbook directors and great handicappers, both sides of the counter. We have a lot of fun with that. And then at 1 o'clock Pacific, it's Vegas Hockey Hotline with terrific guests around the NHL. Obviously, a lot of Golden Knights talks, but believe me, we talk about the NHL. We talk about it in relation to the betting board. Love the hockey show as well. That's 1 p.m. Pacific, kshp.com. And I put the shows out every day. You can follow me on Twitter at Brian Blessing. And, of course, we do videos for you at BangTheBook.com. We'll dive into some specific football games this week. And I think what we'll do, Adam, we'll wait. And we already have some hockey videos that we had put up over the summer months. But, come next week, once we know the rosters, the final trades, and the final cutdowns, we'll talk a lot about the NHL as the new season's about to begin. I love hockey so much. I love the game. But from a wagering perspective, pal, the scheduling situations that arise, ceremony games, dad's trips, there are so many things that are out there in hockey. It's not even a contest. Hockey is the best sport to bet. It's not even close.
Well, we'll try to talk some more of that here as we go through the season on Bang the Book Radio. And as you mentioned, over there on our Bang the Book YouTube page. Brian Blessing, again, the 2 shows are Sportsbook Radio and Vegas Hockey Hotline at Brian Blessing on Twitter. Brian, appreciate your time as always, man. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you again next week.
Adam, have a good one, bud, and say hi to Ralph for me.